When we read a book, we are sure to talk to ourselves in our heads. We do that all the time. But what exactly is it? And what are we actually doing? Why is that voice in us? Researchers have studied the concept of inner voice. They claim that it has been done by our ancestors since ancient times. Early humans may have experienced an inner voice when they had to make important decisions in their life, such as deciding whether to hunt a large animal or look for safer food. The inner voice at the time may be a thought or feeling that comes to their mind, giving advice or warning them about danger. The researchers also point out that the concept of inner voice also appears in the mythology and legends of various ancient cultures, such as the ancient Greek who believed that gods provide inspiration and advice through voice in their minds. In 1864, a French psychologist named Ernest Renan introduced the concept of inner voice. However, serious research into the inner voice only starts at the beginning of the 20th century, when the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung introduced the concept of anima and animus to psychology. Jung argued that the inner voice is closely related to archetypes of the anima and animus, which are the feminine and masculine aspect of human beings. But did the researchers success in answering what the inner voice really is? There is a researcher named Dr. Vernie Hoch has written several books on the inner voice, including The Voice Within and Pieces of Light. In 1952, a psychiatrist named Julian Jaynes thought that the inner voice that is heard in the human mind is a sound that comes from the right side of the brain that is separate from consciousness. Jaynes suggests that ancient people experienced an inner voice experience that was different from that of modern people. He refers to this as bicameral consciousness, which is split between thought and voice command in the brain. However, the findings of more research have shown that the inner voice is not sound that originates from the right side of the brain separate from consciousness, but rather sound that originates from normal activities in the brain. Research also shown that inner voice does not only occurs in modern human but also occurs in ancient human and in animals. Let's forget for a moment about the researchers I mentioned before and let's dive deeper into how our brain works in creating our inner voice. When we talk about the inner voice, quote unquote performance in the brain, we are actually referring to the brain activity involved in the process of forming sounds or speech in our minds. The inner voice is related to several areas in the brain, such as the prefrontal cortex and the temporal cortex. On the other hand, the prefrontal cortex is the region at the front of the brain that is involved in many cognitive functions such as planning, decision making, and self control. The prefrontal cortex is also involved in the processing verbal information and the formation of sounds in our mind. Several studies have shown that the prefrontal cortex may play an important role in producing the sounds in our mind, especially in terms of controlling and modulating inner voice. On the other hand, human psychology has an important role in creating our inner voice because inner voice is basically the result of a complex interaction between cognitive process, emotions, and social environment. In general, inner voice can be formed from several factors, including life experience, culture, personal values, and social norms. For example, someone who grew in an environment that prioritizes values such as assertiveness and preference might have an inner voice that is very critical and assertive in motivating themselves. On the other hand, someone who grew up in a more friendly and relaxed environment might have an inner voice that is friendlier and motivating in a more positive way. Apart from that, psychology also studied how inner voice can affect human behavior. Inner voice is often used as a tool for self-control, pushing oneself to achieve goals and overcoming fear or anxiety. However, in some cases, the inner voice can also be negative and detrimental, such as when someone is desperate and their inner voice becomes very negative and undermines self-confidence. Actually, there are several conditions where the inner voice cannot be created even though the trigger is there. This can occur in some cases of psychological or neuropsychological disorders in which brain function or cognitive process don't work normally. For example, in some cases of neurological disorders such as aphasia or speech disorders, individuals may not be able to produce inner voice normally because there is damage to the area of the brain responsible for language processing. Likewise, in other neurological disorders such as autism or ADHD, where cognitive process such as attention, memory, and impulse control can affect an individual's ability to produce inner voice consistently. On the other hand, in some cases of psychological disorders such as depression or anxiety, individuals may have difficulty to producing a positive inner voice and building self-confidence due, due to emotional disturbance or destructive thoughts. This can happen because of a traumatic life experience or because of biological factors such as an imbalance of chemicals in the brain. Inner voice is the inner voice or internal dialogue that occurs in one mind. It is subjective experience involving various cognitive, emotional, and social processes in the human brain. Inner voice can be positive or negative depending on life experience and individual perceptions of the world around them. Inner voice is believed to influence the way a person sees himself, views the world around him, and influence one's emotions and actions. Although there are many explanations about the inner voice, there are several questions and theories that are still not fully answered, such as neurobiological process behind the inner voice and the right way to optimize the inner voice to be more positive and build self-confidence.